Everyone talks about Costa Rica. Mexico gets the headlines, Portugal became the dream, but quietly another country has been climbing onto more and more American retirement shortlists. Uruguay isn't the cheapest place in Latin America. It isn't tropical, and it won't give you the beach lifestyle a lot of retirees picture when they close their eyes and imagine retirement abroad. Yet thousands of Americans are taking a serious look at it anyway. Today, we're separating the marketing from the reality. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly who Uruguay is perfect for and who should probably cross it off their list entirely. So let's start with the obvious question. Why now? Why is a country most Americans couldn't point to on a map 5 years ago suddenly showing up in retirement group chats and comment sections everywhere? Part of it comes down to timing. Americans are looking beyond the traditional retirement destinations. And honestly, that shift makes a lot of sense once you understand what's driving it. Rising costs in some of the familiar, well-worn retirement countries, the ones we've covered again and again on this channel, have pushed people to start asking a different question. Not just where's cheap, but where's stable? There's a genuine, growing desire for political and economic stability among retirees who've watched other countries shift their rules, their taxes, their visa programs seemingly overnight. People want a safe environment, somewhere they don't have to think twice about walking home after dark. They want a strong healthcare reputation, because, let's be honest, healthcare becomes a bigger priority every single year of retirement, not a smaller one. And they want a predictable residency process, something that doesn't feel like a maze with the rules changing halfway through. Uruguay checks a lot of those boxes in a way that's caught people's attention almost by word of mouth rather than flashy marketing. It's not the country with the biggest expat influencer following. It's not the one with 1,000 YouTube videos promising paradise. It's the quiet option that keeps coming up when people actually start comparing stability, safety, and healthcare side by side. But here's where I need to slow you down for a second, because popularity doesn't always mean affordability. And that's exactly where most people get their first and biggest misunderstanding about this country. Here's the expectation almost everyone walks in with, without even realizing they're carrying it. Uruguay is just another cheap Latin American retirement destination. Another Mexico, another Ecuador, another budget-friendly stop on the same well-worn map. That expectation is wrong. And it's wrong in a way that can genuinely throw off your entire financial plan if you don't catch it early. Here's the reality. The cost of living in Uruguay is higher than most people expect walking in. Noticeably higher. Montevideo, the capital, actually behaves a lot more like a Southern European city in terms of pricing than it does like a typical Central American retirement hub. Think less budget beach town and more quietly expensive coastal capital. Imported goods are expensive, sometimes surprisingly so, and that includes plenty of everyday items you wouldn't think twice about back home. Cars and electronics in particular carry significant markups, the kind that make you do a double take the first time you check prices. And here's where the real budgeting mistakes happen, over and over, in almost the exact same pattern. Retirees compare Uruguay with Mexico. That's the instinct. It's Latin America, so the brain automatically reaches for the Latin American price points it already knows. But that comparison is the wrong one entirely. The more accurate comparison is Portugal. Similar price tier, similar cost structure, similar affordable but not dirt cheap positioning. If you walk in expecting Mexico level prices and budget accordingly, you're going to feel that gap fast, and it's going to feel like a betrayal of expectations rather than just a miscalculation. And that misunderstanding, that one wrong mental comparison, affects far more than just your grocery bill. It touches everything, from your housing decisions to your day-to-day spending habits, to whether your retirement actually feels comfortable or constantly tight. So let's get specific. Let's talk about what your money actually does once you're living there, category by category, instead of staying vague about it. Start with housing. Renting is realistic in Uruguay, genuinely workable for most retirees, especially if you're not insisting on the most premium neighborhoods in Montevideo. Buying, on the other hand, requires additional planning. It's not a snap decision the way some retirees treat property purchases in cheaper countries. The process, the costs, the paperwork, all deserve real time and real research before you commit. Now, daily living. Here's some good news to balance out the earlier warning. Local food offers genuinely good value. If you're eating like a local, shopping at local markets, sticking to what's actually produced and sold within the country, your food budget can look quite reasonable. But the moment you start reaching for imported products, familiar brands from home, specific goods you're used to, costs climb considerably. That's the same pattern we've talked about in other countries, but it's especially pronounced here. Healthcare deserves its own spotlight because, honestly, it's one of Uruguay's biggest strengths, full stop. The country has both strong public and private healthcare systems, and for retirees who've watched healthcare become a growing concern the older they get, that's not a small detail. That's often the deciding factor in choosing a country at all. Quality, access, and reliability here genuinely stand out compared to a lot of other Latin American options. So what's the bottom line when you put all of this together? Singles need to budget carefully. There's less room for error, less margin if things run a little tighter than expected. But couples generally have much more flexibility, especially when two social security checks are combined into one household budget. The math simply works better with two incomes sharing one set of expenses, the same way it does back home. So if the numbers can actually work for the right kind of retiree, what about actually getting there? What does it take to move and become a resident? Here's the expectation people carry into this part of the process, usually without questioning it much. Move today, become a resident tomorrow. Simple, fast, done. The reality is a little more measured than that, though still genuinely encouraging compared to a lot of other countries we've covered on this channel. The residency process in Uruguay is straightforward compared with many countries. That's a real point in its favor, not just marketing spin. But documentation is important, and you can't treat it casually. Processing does take time, sometimes more than people expect, walking in with a "how hard can it be" attitude. And patience is genuinely part of the process here, the same way it is almost everywhere once bureaucracy gets involved. So here's the practical advice, the stuff that actually saves you headaches down the road. Prepare your documents before arriving, rather than scrambling to gather them once you're already there and the clock is ticking on some visa deadline. Verify current immigration requirements directly, since rules can shift, and second-hand information tends to lag behind reality. And budget for legal and administrative costs specifically. These aren't always front and center in people's financial planning, but they're a real, recurring part of the process that deserves its own line item. But here's something worth remembering as you go through all of this. Paperwork isn't actually what determines whether retirees stay long-term and end up happy with their decision. Something else entirely tends to make or break that outcome. This is the part of the Uruguay conversation that catches people most off guard, honestly, more than the cost of living does. Let's start with climate, because this alone eliminates Uruguay for a huge chunk of the retirement abroad crowd before we even get further into it. Uruguay has 4 seasons. Actual 4 seasons, not a permanent tropical summer, not year-round beach weather. Summers are mild, winters are genuinely cool, sometimes cold enough that you'll want a real jacket, not just a light layer. If you've spent years dreaming specifically about escaping winter forever, about never touching a sweater again, this is the moment to pause and really sit with that. Then there's the pace of life, which tends to be one of the things people fall in love with once they actually experience it firsthand. It's relaxed, genuinely relaxed, in a way that's hard to fully appreciate until you're living inside it day to day. It's less crowded than a lot of the more popular expat hotspots, without the tourist-driven chaos that's crept into places like parts of Mexico or Portugal. And the bureaucracy, true to its Latin American roots, moves slower, which can either feel charmingly unhurried or mildly maddening depending entirely on your personality and how much patience you're bringing with you. And then there's language. Spanish greatly improves daily life here, not as an optional nice-to-have, but as something that genuinely shapes how smoothly your day-to-day experience goes. English is available in some areas, sure, especially around certain expat pockets, but it shouldn't be relied upon as your primary way of navigating life. This isn't a place where you can coast entirely on English the way you might in parts of the Philippines or certain corners of Mexico. For some retirees, all of this, the seasons, the slower pace, the need to actually learn some Spanish, is exactly what they're looking for. It feels grounded, real, sustainable. For others, it's an absolute deal breaker, and there's no shame in that either. Knowing which category you fall into is half the battle here. So let's get concrete about who this country actually fits, because Uruguay is not trying to be everything to everyone, and that's honestly refreshing in a space full of countries marketing themselves as the perfect fit for literally anyone with a pulse and a passport. Uruguay is a great fit for couples living on 2 social security checks, where the combined income actually makes the higher cost of living work comfortably. It's a great fit for retirees who are genuinely prioritizing safety above almost everything else. People who've had enough of worrying about petty crime or instability elsewhere. It suits people who are seeking stability over rock-bottom prices. People who'd rather pay a bit more for predictability than save a little and deal with constant uncertainty. It works well for those who are comfortable learning at least basic Spanish, rather than expecting the world to accommodate English. And it's a strong fit for people who genuinely don't need tropical weather to feel like they're truly retired. On the other hand, Uruguay may not be ideal for budget retirees trying to stretch a very limited income as far as it can possibly go. This simply isn't the country for that specific goal. It's not ideal for people expecting Mexico-level prices, because that expectation, as we covered earlier, sets you up for disappointment from day one. It's not the move for anyone wanting year-round tropical beaches, since that fantasy just doesn't exist here no matter how you frame it. And it's probably not the right fit for those who are genuinely uncomfortable with slower bureaucracy, since that particular friction is baked into daily life here in a way that isn't going away. So where does all of this actually land Uruguay on the bigger picture? Where does it rank? Let's break it down category by category, the same way we do with every destination on this channel. Safety earns a full 5 out of 5 stars, genuinely one of Uruguay's strongest, most consistent selling points. Healthcare also earns a full 5 out of 5, standing shoulder to shoulder with the safety score as one of the country's defining strengths. Cost of living lands at 3 out of 5. Solid, workable, but nowhere near bargain territory, and it's important you walk in with that understanding intact. Residency simplicity comes in at 4 out of 5, reflecting a process that's genuinely more manageable than many countries, even with the patience it requires. Climate sits at 3 out of 5, purely because it depends so heavily on personal preference, a strength for some, a deal breaker for others. And English accessibility lands at 3 out of 5, present in pockets, but not something to lean on as a primary strategy. Add it all up, and Uruguay lands at 42 out of 50 on the LivingWise retirement score. That's a genuinely strong number, especially when you consider it's being pulled down mainly by cost and climate, 2 categories that matter enormously to some retirees and barely at all to others. The conclusion here is pretty clear. Uruguay isn't the cheapest retirement destination on the map, not even close. It isn't the warmest either, not by a long shot. But for retirees who genuinely value stability, quality healthcare, and a real, sustainable quality of life over chasing the absolute lowest possible price tag, it may honestly be one of the strongest long-term options anywhere in Latin America. Here's the thing about Uruguay that I think gets lost in a lot of the retirement content out there. Uruguay isn't trying to attract everyone. It's not chasing the broadest possible audience the way some destinations do. And that's exactly why the retirees who do end up there tend to love it so genuinely, so completely, because it was never trying to be a mass market fit in the first place. If you're specifically looking for the lowest possible cost of living, Honestly, there are better options out there, and we've covered plenty of them on this channel already. But if you're looking for predictable rules, strong institutions that actually function the way they're supposed to, quality healthcare you can rely on as you age, and a slower, calmer pace of life that doesn't come with constant uncertainty, Uruguay absolutely deserves a spot on your shortlist. It's not flashy. It's not the country everyone's talking about at the dinner party. But quiet, dependable, and stable might be exactly what your retirement actually needs, even if it wasn't what you originally pictured. If Uruguay sounds interesting to you, but somewhere in the back of your mind you're thinking, I really don't want to learn Spanish at this point in my life, then watch the video on your screen next. It's about an English-speaking island where American retirees can settle in comfortably, without that language barrier standing between them and their new life. And for some of you watching this right now, that might actually be the better fit. Click that video now and I'll see you there.